Це були доводи, що ми не можемо впроваджувати психоделічно асистовану терапію в наукове використання, тому що психоделіки є недостатньо дослідженими для того, щоб їх досліджувати. Ми стикались я спеціально говорю про реальні, тим не менш, доводи наших правоохоронних органів, щоб ми розуміли ступінь абсурдності, в якій опинилась Україна. Зараз постанова Кабінету Міністрів 4 рази отримала відмову від правоохоронних органів. Зараз вона піде на погодження в 5-й раз. І зараз відбувається перемога. Я розповідаю просто реальну ситуацію, щоб ми всі були on the same page. І зараз відбуваються перемовини про перемовини. Ми домовляємося, в якому форматі, коли і як ми будемо працювати сторона правоохоронна зі стороною охорони здоров'я, для того, щоб погодити реальні чи вигадані перепони впровадженню в наукову практику психоделічно асистованої терапії. Потрібно розуміти, що 95% проекту постанови Кабінету Міністрів щодо впровадження в наукову практику психоделічно асистованої терапії – це питання безпеки і питання контролю потенційного витоку психоделіків на чорний ринок. При цьому також потрібно розуміти, що у України вкрай ефективна система контролю, і ані кетаміну, ані профополу, які є в продажі для медичних закладів, вони є дозволеними і легальними, їх немає на чорному ринку. Тому ми зараз говоримо про те, що нам необхідно завести психоделіки в вже працюючу систему, яка вже ефективно контролює нерозповсюдження небезпечних речовин в популяції. І ми займаємо дуже просту позицію. Ми говоримо, що 95% проекту постанови Кабінету Міністрів про безпеку. Якщо ви вважаєте, що це недостатньо безпечно, шановна Національна поліція, будь ласка, скажіть нам, що змінити, і ми змінимо. Ми не бачимо жодних причин, чому не дотримуватись тих профілів і протоколів безпеки, які встановить Міністерство внутрішніх справ України. Я не можу бути настільки ж оптимістичним, наскільки я був 2 роки тому, коли я казав, що це невеличка робота, яку ми зможемо швидко зробити. Я розумію, що зараз ми перебуваємо в стані, коли ми будемо підніматися вище по бюрократичних сходах. Якщо зараз найближчим часом ми не зможемо врегулювати питання на рівні між Національною поліцією України, Міністерством внутрішніх справ, Міністерством охорони здоров'я і Комітетом здоров'я нації парламенту, це питання буде необхідно виносити на уряд, якщо не вдасться вирішити там, на рівень президента України. І останнє, що я б хотів сказати, що ви можете зробити. Це 3 речі. Ну, перша, це навіть до першої, це цієї події буде комюніке, буде спільна заява, і це також велика поміч в розповсюдженні на український уряд, міністерство, національну поліцію і так далі. Друге, ми в Європарламенті. Комісія Європарламенту з громадського здоров'я, Європарламентський комітет, може ухвалити рішення звернутись до Комітету Верховної Ради України щодо інтенсифікації впровадження психоделічно асистованої терапії в наукову практику, звернутися до Національної поліції України і уряду України, і прем'єр-міністра України. І це допоможе. Це практична дуже річ, яку можна зробити, і це допоможе. Що ще можна зробити? Перша леді України займається питаннями ментального здоров'я. Будь-яка велика конференція з залученням першої леді України, з залученням неформальним, а з залученням реальним, коли вона бачить реальних ветеранів, яким це допомогло, коли вона бачить реальних пацієнтів, коли вона бачить реальну перспективу, може нам дуже сильно допомогти. Оскільки одним з наших опонентів є один з координаційних центрів при Кабінеті Міністрів, які без пояснення причин дуже різко опонують впровадження психоделічної асистованої терапії. При цьому перша леді має дуже великий вплив на цей центр. Третя річ – дослідження. Нам потрібно, щоб до нас стояла черга з дослідників, які хочуть працювати в Україні. Я не говорю про те, що потрібно прийти з комітментами на бюджети. Я говорю про те, що нам потрібно дослідники, провідні міжнародні центри наукові, які будуть звертатися до Кабінету міністрів України і до Міністерства охорони здоров'я України і до Нацполіції з питаннями і проханням інтенсифікувати впровадження психоделічної асистованої терапії в наукову практику. Для нас це серйозний левередж в роботі з Національною поліцією. Те, що вони блокують не абстракцію, вони блокують те, що може бути рятувати українських ветеранів, рятувати українських цивільних, рятувати українців. І для нас це дуже важливо. На цьому я б хотів завершити. Я дякую всім за увагу. Я дякую всім за вашу допомогу.
Thank you, Dmytro. Sadly, you're not the only country in Europe that has problems with the police trying to stop innovation in healthcare. But obviously your need is considerably greater than ours and many of the others. However, we can move now to see how Europe is beginning to develop guidelines which can help you and us. And I'm going to invite Professor Gert Dom from the University of Antwerp, who's past president of the European Psychiatric Association, who've been developing a set of guidelines and thought pieces which will help us. So over to you, Gert.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the organizers for inviting me. My name is Gert Dom, and I'm talking here not on behalf, but based on my experience as immediate past president of the European Psychiatric Association. For those who do not know the association, just good to know that I think it's a large association representing about 80,000 psychiatrists in all of Europe, with 47 members, national psychiatric associations as a member, of which the Ukrainian Psychiatric Association is one of the active members. And I want to stress this because the last years, also during my presidency, there has been a growing exchange and collaboration between the associations with Ukraine. And as far as European Psychiatric Association and European psychiatry, I really can state that Ukrainian psychiatry is part of European psychiatry. I think what the colleague was saying, I'm not sure about the UK, David, but for Ukrainian psychiatry, I think it's very important. So this collaboration has been growing very good, and we're very happy that this is going very, very strong. Now, about the topic of today, I have just 3 points to highlight, and I think we have the panel later on to discuss more in depth. But I think, as I put a first slide on this, we all know, and you have highlighted it very good. I think there is so much going on, of course, in Ukraine, but I think there's a shared problem overall in Europe as to the increased burden due to mental health. And the increased needs for mental health care, and this is quite enormous. I just highlight these 3 little data that are on the slide. Of course, the enormous and disastrous effects of the war, but on the other hand, with this very recent OECD paper, just highlighting the costs. And this is just the medical cost of alcohol, depression, and anxiety, which are huge. There's still this enormous treatment gap. And if you look on a worldwide scale, and that's quite amazing and quite enormous, if you look to the evolution of the last 30 years and the effect of mental health problems, you see over the 30 years an increase of 60% in the effects of anxiety disorders, an increase of 25% in the increase of the effects of depression, which is massive. And in contrast with other kind of diseases where you see a reduction overall of 12% of the other somatic diseases. So mental health problems really form a very big challenge. And I think that is the reason why many in the field, like you and every country, is thinking, how should we go about it? And we need to find new, novel ways, not only to close treatment gaps, but to also find new and novel ways to put treatments in effect. And I think and that's the next slide, I think one of the important steps there is, this is being recognized also by the EMA, the European Medicine Agency, who has produced in January 25 their guidance in the looking for new treatments for depression, because it's really challenge. And for the very first time, they put also in a chapter on psychedelics, highlighting the possibility of psychedelics, of course, highlighting the possible problems in implementation, but as a joint search. So I think also from the European regulation perspective, there is at least interest in this process. And we build on it further with the European Psychiatric Association, and that is the next slide, in developing also a consensus paper. And I stress this as a consensus paper because you're looking at me as representing, let's say, real world psychiatrists. So these are 80,000 psychiatrists that are doing their work real world. And I think we were happy to have a consensus with this paper stating the importance and the promises of psychedelic therapy, and of course stating a lot of challenges where we need to work together with, but indicating really there is an interest. So on many levels, I think we are at the brink of bringing together and saying it's an important point in history and development where we can bring change together. And so in my last slide, and I think also my last minute, it's my last slide, but I want to emphasize also, and I had the great honor of being in the advisory board of the Lancet Commission of Rebuilding Mental Health in Ukraine, which I think was a fabulous project with a great output, with very concrete steps. And just, I think, 8 days ago, a second paper in the Lancet has been published, a follow-up of that paper, looking to where the initiatives are going at this moment. And I really find it very important, as was stressed by the former speaker also, the chapter on research there is so important. It's so important to develop research, and it's so important for Ukraine, but for all countries in Europe, in European psychiatry, to join together in research projects, international research projects, also for psychedelics. So I'm very happy that also in this important Lancet Commission project, there is this emphasis of doing joint, and that subscribing, agreeing with others, doing joint work in this. So now going to my final slide, bringing this together in this triangle, I think from the EPA side, the European Psychiatric Association, we can state that we really have, let's say, interest. We see the possibilities of psychedelic treatment. We think we are on the brink, and the need for not only the science is good. Now we have to go to the implementation. Now we have to go to good regulation, etc., etc. So that is, and I think this is a consensus where we found, and if you see also with the EMA and Ukraine, so there's a lot of movement there, but we are on the brink. And it's my warm invitation, because I think the science is good. Now we do the next steps. And for the next steps, in many countries, we are searching. And there we can learn from each other. We can learn from Ukraine, and Ukraine can learn from what's happening in Germany, etc. So we have a joint mission here as countries, as European countries, to learn together, exchange, and trying to come as fast as possible to good regulation where safety, effectivity, good indications, etc., are typified. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Gareth. And I think it's quite exciting, the idea that Ukraine can actually be a sort of pioneer in solving the global problem, given that you have a massive problem, a more pressing problem than the rest of us, but you could be part of the bigger solution. And I find that really quite a thrilling prospect. So now we'll move on to Professor Erik Vermeten from the Netherlands, who's also been a military man and a pioneer of the study of the treatment of PTSD.
Thank you, David. I'll start by congratulating PAREA on organizing this event, and it is wonderful to see all these people here, and especially the Ukrainian colleagues, friends, I must say. So as I was listening to these initial conference or presentation, I was thinking, like, why are we here today? And as a psychiatrist, you're entitled to ask that question, right? Why are we here? But why are we here today? And I think what I'm hearing is there is a war that needs to be won, right? And there are several wars that are ongoing, but the war that is being won is a one that you addressed earlier about the renal transplant. All doctrines that need to be won, but also the absurdity into the argumentation of moving forward. And I think that passionates us incredibly. So a few slides that I have is in our back pocket. Can I get the next one? And the back pocket is what the president at the White House just announced on, what was it, 18th of April. Accelerating research with a couple of novel psychedelics. And we all have our thoughts about it, but it is increasing, giving us attention on something that we can all benefit from. Next slide, please. So I think, and your point was, as I heard by others, is that UPRA is presenting something to us which is astounding, and I hope that they will be able to achieve that. And Ukraine should be proud if these 7 compounds that they're proposing can be rescheduled. And they're all there, and they're all different. We lump them together as they're all psychedelics, but they're all Schedule 1 drugs. And if we want to move forward, and the UN treaties as not blocking that, then we do a great service. The middle one is the one that I'll be focusing on. MDMA, particularly for the treatment of PTSD. And may I get the next one? And I traveled with Pavel Baum, who's here next to me, a couple of months ago to Ukraine, where we visited several of these regulating bodies. We were in a shelter bunker in Kiev, where we talked with Dimitru and other regulators of internal affairs, and sort of how that war needs also to be won, which was difficult because it's difficult to get the parties at the table and it's difficult to get agreement. It is delighted to see how much enthusiasm there is, but it's also an uphill struggle. Next slide, please. And we went also to Dnipro, and Dnipro is way in the back where, closer to the front line, where the need is probably most heartfelt. So this is a slide. Can I have the volume up, please? Can we hear this? This is a medic. If there's no sound, we cannot hear his voice, but can you hear? Is there no voice in the European Parliament to a video that is presented here?
Too many voices.
Too many voices. Otherwise, I'll speak to it. This is a medic who's talking. He's at the front line, and I think our friend Stanislav will recognize this. And he's just washing off the blood of one of the soldiers that's been hit and hurt and killed in one of these tanks. And and he says, you will not, the quote that I wanted to emphasize here is what he says: you cannot understand if you haven't been there. You cannot understand if you haven't been there. So what a lot of the veterans, when they come back home, if they come back home, they're alienated. And the typical picture, can I go to the next slide? Let's skip this one. Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. This is what happens when the veterans do come home. If they ever come home, they're in this bubble. I've been in the military. I've worked with veterans for 20 plus years, and the soldiers from Srebrenica, but also from Afghanistan. They are disconnected from the environment. They wish that they'd be there, but they cannot get out, and other people cannot get in because nobody will understand. And they're always on guard, and they have that fragmented life. The war is over, but it's still there. It never dissipated. A life of service, life in a bubble. And that's typically a picture that I think a lot of service members will face when they get back home. Nobody will understand that there's not even words. There's this alexithymia or ineffability to talk about the situations that they've been in. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And in psychotrauma, we're talking about PTSD. We've seen a decade, maybe even more, of different ways that we conceptualized PTSD, from the First World War to the Second World War, to the today's. And these are small letters. And we've given different names for the different phenomenologies of what we now call PTSD. I come from the Netherlands, and we had just our Liberation Day was yesterday, where we dealt with the concentration camp survivors. And interestingly, if I go to the next slide, we have had a history of one psychiatrist in my university town that actually was ahead of the game and was using psychedelics for the treatment of people who came back from Auschwitz, from the concentration camps. And he used LSD to liberate the people, to open up their minds and to give them their voices back. And these are a few pictures. And one is there from Shavidi, Hilde Nur. He's a Jewish Auschwitz survivor, and he was treated with LSD. And he wrote a beautiful book, Shavidi, in which he described his 4 sessions with LSD. And we're talking now about the early 70s. So that's 60 years ago. And then we got the backlash of not being able to work with these compounds. So we alienated ourselves from a large perspective. That's a book by De Villa, and there's a beautiful film by Asaf Lapid that I can highly recommend you. It's called Return from the Other Planet, in which you will see what it is to be treated with LSD if you have survived Auschwitz, with the survivor guilt that is haunting you. Next slide, please. So we've had an evolution in PTSD therapy, and I followed that field for quite a while, where we looked at it from a fear-based circuitry disorder, and David has contributed to the field. He was there a long way back, and then we've modernized our thinking into dynamic neural network circuits and to opening opportunities for novel treatments. And I think we're now at the sort of the far right of that spectrum here, where we see like multimodal treatments and opening up sort of, there's no one compound that can treat PTSD, but it is a catalyst for an evolving therapeutic process that we're in. And I think MDMA fits right into that evolution of psychedelic approaches for PTSD. Next slide, please. So I was the PI of the first European open label study with MDMA for the treatment of PTSD. In the Netherlands, we did, and also with some other European partners, we did 21 patients. Here's my co-therapist. This is Center 45, and we treated open label with MDMA, a group of 21 participants. Next slide, please. And this is what we saw. This is the blue one is the CAPS, which is the PTSD symptom scale before treatment, and then the blue next, I don't have a pointer here, is after treatment, and the Sheehan disability scale. So yes, we saw significant reduction. What we also saw in the MDMA studies that were coming from MEPs overseas in the US. So we replicated their findings. We were very happy, and we were not able to do a phase 3 study. Okay, but that's enough. Another story, but we were very incentivized by the fact that MDMA was a very, very effective treatment for PTSD. Next slide, please. This is one typical vignette of one of the Dutch bed veterans that participated. And what he said, and this is a cartoonesque representation of what he said, it unstuck my treatment. It unstuck my treatment, as if he was not open, and the MDMA gave him an opportunity to get his voice back, and it unstuck his treatment. These are his words. It doesn't treat it to the end point, but it unstuck a process that started with the MDMA. Next slide, please. I'll give you one vignette, and it would be nice if we could hear it, but let's start if you put the cursor at the top middle vignette here. There's a Marine who is, just play that one, please. And I don't know if we have heard, otherwise it's subtitled, and I'll tell you what he describes. And this is a guy that saw his buddy being killed in a Bushmaster because he got incoming fire. He was in Iraq, and he was in Iraq, get incoming fire. He could not prevent his buddy from being killed alive, burned alive. And he always had that guilt. I should have done something to. And there he is on MDMA. And what he says is, I see it completely different now. I've never been able to visualize it so hard before. And those were the words, it unstuck his treatment, and he opened up. He saw it from a different perspective. He saw it in slow motion. And that was not the healing of his PTSD, but it was the beginning of a process that could peel the layers of the onion. And then he could evolve to the next one. Of course, he was bullied as a child. Of course, he was bullied as a child, and therefore he wanted to go to Afghanistan. But it started a process that he really, really benefited from. Next slide, please. Just next. Keep clicking. Yeah. So for here, the audience, I think everybody knows what MDMA is. This psychotherapy is on. It's not one therapy pill. It is not every day, 3 times a day an MDMA or so. No, that's kind of a naive understanding that some people think, right? When we talk to the leaders in the field, when we go to Donetsk or wherever, people think like you need to do three MDMA pills a day for like that many. We turn veterans into zombies. Is what we heard. And we were shown the door when we were in Kiev. And that was appalling to me. Like, I want to treat patients to the best we can. I don't want to treat patients and turn them into zombies. So that's a discourse, a narrative that we really, really have to work hard. And we cannot do it on a fortnight. We need to make baby steps. And we're making a lot of baby steps. And that's why we're sitting here. Next slide, please. So a lot of neuroscience is supporting us. A lot of nurses, and here's David also with a picture from the old days, David, where these are metacognitive brain shifts. Our brain is thinking in a novel way, as allowing information that we haven't been able to think about in a novel way. It's opening up opportunities. And I think that is supporting us. So when we talk to the leaders and the regulators, this is not something that we phony think up or so. That's a fantasy. It is rooted into real hardcore science. Next slide, please. And we don't give it as a first frame of first intervention. Now, I brought here this, how are you today? And this is what you, Pavel, said also. And Ukraine is doing very much on mental health. It's not like we're going to change mental health by just introducing psychedelics. No. Ukraine is doing a lot, but we can augment and we can support when it's not helpful. And there is where our opportunity is. If you get stuck in your treatment and you don't get benefit from EMDR, or cognitive behavioral therapy, then you may benefit from an intervention that's called MDMA assisted psychotherapy or other psychedelics, and they can then do miracles. So it needs to be positioned really careful in a care pathway. Next slide, please. So I was part of the state committee that reported to our Minister of Health 2 years ago, just before the FDA decided negatively to the advisory committee decided negative to the FDA, and then the FDA decided negative on the regulation of PTSD. We're very positive. And here's our group of experts. We said, make MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD possible ASAP. We don't want to have more randomized controlled trials. We've got enough. We need to do naturalistic, real world evidence. And we need to negotiate with the national IRBs and the EMA on the enrollment and real world data, moving beyond towards implementation science. Next slide, please. In the Netherlands, we are a big producer of MDMA. And that's a problem because there's a lot of illegality and there's a lot of labs that are dumping their ecological waste into the local towns and the forests. So we had a difficulty situation where we should reschedule it based on the legal opportunities to prevent these labs. But we have a gray market, and that's everywhere, and we don't want it to go underground. And we all see patients, the ones who are in this room that have clinical care to patients. Well, if you can't give it to me, I'll go underground. That's a concern for me, a real concern, because I have no idea what the quality is of the interventions that people get when they go underground. It could harm us, backlash to us, where there's dangers and difficult the consequences. Next slide, please. So we started with a group, a large consortium to submit a grant in which it's called Frontline. We don't have it. It's 10 million grants. We don't have it. We don't know. But these are the countries that are participating into an implementation science-based consortium proposal. And you see the blue country there? Yes, that's Ukraine. There are 4 sites in Ukraine that are participating in this implementation science. I hope that we get it, not only because of the other countries that can benefit from it, but also that it benefits directly from Ukraine. And by bringing MDMA then to Ukraine, we also bring the knowledge and all the backbone. It is by a CRO, it's the normal way that we do science. And I hope that we can get there. And you see the time course, it'll be 29 by the time that we can do this research, but I look forward and fingers crossed. Next slide, please. So we need a roadmap for action. And I have only focused in my 10 minutes, which is over time now, to MDMA. And MDMA is one of the psychedelics. And it's not really a psychedelic. It's an entactogen, as you saw on my very first slide. It doesn't make it a different drug, but it's categorized as one of the drugs that we're talking here today. So we need to have a long-term planning, a short-term, 1 year, 1 to 3 year, and move beyond. My worry is that the industry is going to hijack it and is going to make it very expensive by the end of the day. And that's the concern. We see that with other compounds in the field as well. So we need to worry about that. Now, there's a lot of individual PAREA is here. We have in the Netherlands, and Joost Breeksema is here from Open. I can highly recommend you to go to the ICPR, Joost. And there's a cost initiative, and there are these initiatives that I think we need to capitalize on to make ourselves understood. Next slide, please. Yeah, this could be what the future of MDMA-assisted therapy could be like. This could be a group setting, right? You can lie on a bed, but you can also have a reclining chair. You can have here 6 participants with 2 therapists. Is this what it's going to look like? I do not know, but it may well be. Thank you. Next slide. And yes, typically I say to people, like when you have MDMA therapy, we send the amygdala on vacation. Why is it so difficult to do these therapies? Because the amygdala in its way. Nobody wants to go back. We sent the amygdala on vacation. So this is my AI supported slide of sending the amygdala on vacation. And next slide, please. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Eric. Very clear. It's lovely. Covered everything in such a short space of time, but also we got to wish you good luck. If it would be great to see a comparison between the UK, the Netherlands, and Ukraine in terms of real-world evidence with MDMA. I hope you get the grant, and if you do, we'll celebrate. So we're moving on now back to our Ukrainian speakers, and we have Edom, yes, and we have Elena. Well, maybe introduce yourselves then, because it'll be easier than me telling you.
Yeah, thank you. Very happy to be here. Thank you for invitation. First of all, thank you for supporting our country and having in the focus our problems, such as mental health issues as well. My name is Adam. I'm a director of the State Expert Center. We are organization state-owned under the Ministry of Health, and we are responsible for improvement of clinical trials in our country, marketing authorization of drugs like medicines and medical devices, health technology assessment, pricing policy. We are designing protocols of treatment, standards, and all this kind of documents. And before that, I was working in the Ministry of Health as a deputy minister, but I'm not a doctor and not a professor. So sorry if I'll have some mistakes. It seems like I have to shorten a little bit my slides because we don't have enough time. It's only me and my colleague between panel discussion. So I will try to be quick. Next slide, please. Starting from the morning, I guess we all understand the background and what's going on in Ukraine. I don't want to repeat the figures. And actually, I think a lot of people understand that we have approximately 1.5 million people who are facing PTSD right now. And if we speak directly about our military, like soldiers and veterans, it can be more than 300,000 people. So it seems like it is very difficult to treat such amount of patients in a regular way, in a classic way, which we were known for the last 10 years or the last 5 years. And actually, it was in the morning, but when we speak about pricing policy and budgets, for the last 2 years, Ukrainians are buying antidepressants in 73% more often than it was before the full-scale invasion. It's a big amount of money. It's a big amount of outpatient, like expenditures of the people, because not every person want to go to the doctor, and not everybody are like after, like our colleague said, not everybody so open-minded in order to tell about their mental health issues. So about innovative treatment, of course, we recognize the potential of psychedelic treatment. Of course, we understand it, but as it was in the morning, a lot of people were asking very simple questions. They were thinking that it is just a pill, just a medicine. And we are trying to focus that it is a therapy. It is not the first line. It is not even the second line. It is third line therapy. So first of all, you have a therapy with doctor. Then you can use antidepressant, and only if it is not working, you're switching to psychedelic therapy. And it is always inpatient, always controlled. Usually it's state-owned hospitals. And when people asking the questions, they're thinking about pills, I guess, which can be bought in any pharmacy with your recipe. It is not working like that. And I think our task number one is to communicate very correctly that it is a therapy supported by substance. It is not a pill. It is not a medicine. It's substance. And it is just supporting the doctor to help the patient. And the main thing that the patient want to be supported. It is not forced by doctor. People, they want it, they need it. That is the main point, I guess, because it seems like some different organizations, they are asking and they are thinking about some pills and medicines, and it is completely different things. Of course, as I saw in your presentation, we are still thinking about clinical trials in the classic way of medicines. So we will be asking for GMP certifications, for example, for these suppliers. Of course, prices will go higher. The same when we will register these clinical trials, we will ask to comply with GCP principles. Again, it will make the price much more higher, and it will be a little bit more complicated every time. And as I understand, EMA having the same approach. In our country, you have this legal framework, and we can go in that way. But it seems to me it will be a little bit complicated for everybody. Maybe we should think about new approaches, because if we will be in the universe of the random clinical trials of medicines, if you'll ask to do health technology assessment, then we'll wait for years for pricing policy. The idea will die from the start. So maybe together with EMA, together with you, we can design a new approach, because this box of the simple random clinical trials is not working, I think, anymore, because everybody thinking that it is medicines, you have to provide this, and that. And sometimes it is difficult. I don't think that we will find a lot of suppliers in EU countries with GMP certificates, with all the 5 modules of the dossier. It is not a medicine again, it's just a substance. And of course, I think we have the same principles as you. It's controlled access. We are not asking about anything else. It's usage exclusively in the licensed healthcare settings, but also there is a difference between Ukraine and EU, for example. In our country, usually licensed is a hospital. So we have decentralization, and every hospital has its own license. But the difference from EU countries, some member states, that in EU countries, doctors personally have a license and they have a responsibility. In our country, hospital have a license. So it is sometimes so difficult to control and to put responsibility on somebody with a surname. That's why our national police are frightened. And we should understand that it's not only about the document, it is about the mindset. And we want to, and maybe we have to change this as well, because if every doctor, if each therapist will have a personal, okay, let's call it certificate, not a license, because it is difficult to change the law, but it will help. It will break the ice, I guess, because right now it's just a hospital. In a hospital, you can have 1,000 people staff. When you have 1,000 people staff with responsibility, it means nobody is responsible. So that's why maybe we have these difficulties with our national police. Of course, it is always state authorization and the oversight. Of course, it is clearly defined procedures, non-experiments. And of course, it is mandatory specialized training for doctors. Always, every year, every 2 years, together with international partners, because I guess it's impossible to analyze in advance what will be the next year. Technologies are changing very quickly, and we have to train together our doctors. And maybe Ukraine can be the first country in the world which will place this type of treatment in the protocols. Because right now there is no country in the world, because everybody will shout that it is not evidence-based, please do not place it in there. So maybe we can try with the clinical trials in our country to prove that there is evidence, it is based, Let's try with protocols for treatment. Next slide, please. I think we spoke this about legal restrictions. We have a special bylaw. Right now we have MDMA and other chemical substances, for example, in the list with forbidden. It is strictly forbidden in our country, and we are asking to change the bylaw to make it like controlled. But the tricky moment that after that, national police can say, okay, let's do it with quotas, like we have in narcotics, because there is international convention. So you should tell me in advance how many kilograms you will use. Nobody will tell you because nobody knows. So then national police will say, okay, you asked us to change a bylaw, so we change it. Right now, let's work with quotas. And again, you'll spend a year with these quotas. And I think that we need young leaders in our hospitals, young doctors who will push this. And it is not only about the bylaw, it is again about mindset. If you will change it, I think it is just interagency discrepancies, because Ministry of Health, our parliament, they want these innovations, and we understand why we want it. And national police, they always want to minimize the risk. It is their job. We don't have to fight with them. We have to convince them that we have some tools to control it. We have evidence how it helps our patients. So please, let's do it together. And again, I think everybody understands that we have this workforce shortage. If we will train a lot of doctors, we'll have a lot of young leaders who will communicate correctly. And then I think we will have the result which we want. This draft of bylaw, again, I think it's 5th time it's went to the central executive bodies, but I think without young leaders, it will be 6th and 7th, 8th time. So let's change the mindset of our people. Next slide, please. Implementation model, I think we'll have like discussion and panel discussion after. It's just our idea. We can use right now the framework of clinical trials. It is working, we have it. We have actually new bylaw on the clinical trials. It was implemented 2 weeks ago, the same as in EU countries, fully comply with your legislation, so we can use it. We can start with that, but it seems to me we'll change the logic, because clinical trials are strictly regulated. If it will work, okay. If it will not work, maybe we can together have another approach. But right now, as a baseline, like clinical trials, okay, let's start. It's about some settings in our legislation, we will do it. Of course, everybody understand, and we should communicate it, that it is always only in patient settings. You cannot buy it in the pharmacy and spread it in the streets, because not everybody understands it. And it is always enhanced. And I think after that, if we'll prove it, police and all other stakeholders will understand that it is safe. And we are not starting a new war on the streets for the drugs. It's completely another story. It is a message from me. Thank you very much for your time. I know that we have strict very graphics, so I'll pass the word to my colleague in order just to highlight which documents we need and how we can move forward on technical level with clinical trials. Thank you very much for your attention.
Before Alina speaks, I just want to tell you how we have been approaching the police in the UK. Many police are traumatized. Many police get beaten up. Many police see, like you saw from the doctor on the military. They are also traumatized, yeah. and they are seeking help too. It's just their bosses aren't.
Шановні колеги, партнери, добрий день. Я Олена Семенченко, заступник директора з питань реєстрації, фармаконагляду та аудиту Державного експертного центру МОЗ України. Їх вітаю, дякую. В Україні сфера клінічних досліджень регулюється чітко нормативно-правовою базою. Важливо підкреслити, що в 2025 році Україна оновила настанову з належної клінічної практики GCP. Це означає, що наша держава працює відповідно до сучасних глобальних підходів, де пріоритетом є безпека, права та благополуччя учасників досліджень. Наступний слайд. Незважаючи на складні умови останніх років, Україна демонструє спроможність проводити якісне клінічне випробування. З 2022 року в Україні було затверджено 342 клінічних випробування. Переважно це дослідження 3-ї та 2-ї фази. Це свідчить про здатність України працювати у чутливих медичних напрямах, відповідних до міжнародних вимог. Наступний слайд. Наступний слайд, please. Існує розрив між глобальними науковими тенденціями та національною практикою. На сьогодні в Україні дослідження психоделічних речовин практично відсутні. Основною причиною є суворе регулювання їх обігу. Воно є обґрунтованим з огляду на громадську безпеку, однак водночас стримує розвиток цього перспективного напрямку. Частина психоделічних речовин віднесена до переліків особливо небезпечні психотропні речовини, обіг яких заборонено, або психотропні речовини, обіг яких обмежено. Крім того, наразі відсутні міжнародні протоколи лікування особливо небезпечними психотропними речовинами, які в установленому порядку визначаються в Україні. Також існує обмежена кількість доказових даних щодо ефективності їх використання при різних захворюваннях, що, власне, і зумовлює необхідність проведення клінічних досліджень. Як вже зазначалося, сьогодні Україна розглядає дослідження психоделічних речовин виключно в межах клінічних випробувань лікарських засобів, не як окрему практику. Це означає, що до них застосовуються ті ж самі високі стандарти дотримання принципів належної клінічної практики, етичний нагляд, наукова обґрунтованість та суворий контроль безпеки. Наступний слайд. Клінічні бази, що планують проводити дослідження із застосуванням психоделічних речовин, повинні забезпечити наявність відповідної ліцензії, обов'язкову відповідність національному законодавству з клінічних досліджень, дотримання міжнародних стандартів GCP, пріоритет безпеки, прав і благополуччя пацієнтів. Для досліджень з психоделічними речовинами особлива увага приділяється таким аспектам: обґрунтованість місця проведення, вимоги до кваліфікації дослідницької команди, чітко прописаний психотерапевтичний компонент у протоколі дослідження, детальний план управління ризиками, контроль обігу досліджування лікарського засобу. Наступний слайд. Глибока травма та ПТСР позбавляють людину відчуття власної спроможності. Клінічні дослідження із застосуванням психоделічних речовин відкриють нове вікно можливостей, але сама речовина – це лише каталізатор. Справжнє відновлення починається тоді, коли пацієнт перестає бути пасивним об'єктом і стає активним учасником процесу. Наступний слайд. Наразі розглядається можливість концентрації дослідницької діяльності у сфері психоделічних речовин на базі Центру психічного здоров'я та реабілітації ветеранів Лісова Поляна, як установи, що мають відповідний досвід та кадровий потенціал. Наступний слайд. З іншого боку, допомагаючи ветеранам та цивільним повернути відчуття власної спроможності, ми закладаємо фундамент нашого майбутнього, бо міцне суспільство будують міцні духом люди. Щиро дякую за увагу.
Thank you, Elena. And can I just be clear then? So Ukraine or Russia decided to not only ratify the 1971 convention, but to exceed the recommendations, because the 71 convention clearly states research and indigenous use is allowed. So Russia, or the USSR then, I guess, decided to impose a higher level than the UN convention. So if you move to the UN convention level, a lot of your problems will be solved, because the rest of us are working within the confines of the 71 convention. Is that difficult?
The main problem, thank you for your question. The main problem that, it's always when you have convention or when you have different type of documents, which are like a framework document for many member states, sometimes for different regulations, you have local amendments, adjustments, and it is not prohibited. So historically, a lot of years ago, police and all other stakeholders which are dealing with drugs was highly corrupted. And I think on that time, we had such situation when we had to do this. It was like difficult times. And after the revolution of dignity, when we have a lot of reforms, including national police, now it is not corrupted. And I think we just need to adjust a little bit our legislation, because we had medical reform, we have reform of police, we have a lot of reforms in public procurement, in anti-corruption. I guess now we are ready and we can do it. We just need to do it.
Thank you. So we're now into the panel discussion. Ace, I think you're taking over now from me. So please introduce yourself. And,
Thank you, David. Thank you for passing the word to me. I'm Matija Spoda, and I'm a co-founder of UPRA, Ukrainian Psychedelic Research Association. And I have to say that we started in 2021, and now we have 2026. That's a long way. And here, just will take a minute to thank to our friends, partners, and people who support us. It's the same faces all the time. And today we have a remarkable event, which means that we achieved something. So thank you for that. And I really want to thank you to Mr. Andriukaitis, who is generally hosting this meeting today, and PAREA, Tadeusz, David, our wonderful professors, and of course, Pavel Bem, who is helping us to advocate within our own country, and to all the attendees. And that's a really important discussion. And probably we all understand that now we reach a certain moment when some decisions have to be made, and they are ready, almost ready to be made. And this is a very crucial point. So I'd like to start this discussion with the short questions to our speakers. And we have a little short time, so it will be I expect your answers and something like 3-4 minutes. And then maybe we can have the questions to each other or questions from audience if we will have enough time left. So if you don't mind, Erica, I would start with you, Professor Vermeten. And I have actually a couple of questions, 2 in 1 to you. And the first one is kind of philosophical. How can we normalize the discourse around psychedelics, in general? And the second question, given your experience as a military psychiatrist, can you tell us more what your organization is doing to ensure that the veterans have access to good and scientifically based psychedelic therapy? Maybe you can tell us more about this frontline project. It would be really good.
Thank you. I used more time than already in my speaking time, but no, good question. And what I'm learning from where we are and where this field is moving, we are making baby steps. And maybe the metaphor is not correct, but a lot of baby steps make a lot of miles or so. 21, 26 is 5 years, but if you see where we came from, then we're doing the right work. And I mean, look at the audience here, look at the incentive here. So I mean, I was just reminding myself how we need to normalize the discourse. And I remember with Pavel Bem, we were I may share that anecdote, that we were doing our best with a delegation from Czech Republic and et cetera, where the chair of that meeting still, and I just said it, and if I echo the words, I'm not going to allow my veterans to be treated like zombies or turned into zombies. I'm like, come on, where are we? What are we doing? And then we're showing the door with a smile on the face. That is really a concern. So I'm not blaming that person for having that idea. We need to help that person to normalize the thinking. Yes, we came from a time where we felt that psychedelics would give you holes in the brain where your neurocognitive performance would decline. And then I could see, yes, if Ukraine needs to win this war, I don't want to have zombies on the front line. No, you're never going to win the war. So we need to help them. No, you need the best soldiers at the front line. So how do we engage in a discourse where this narrative actually is changed? Now, what we need to tell, these drugs are not craving, they're not addictive, and we need to retell the story with empirical science. And I think what we're doing very well is putting the research out to show that. But we need to engage. We don't want to disqualify people that they're stupid or so. No, they need to be educated. And we're speaking for the choir here, preaching for the choir here. We all know this, but we need to reach out. And that's why I felt that what we did, and it was -30, and it was a lot of it was cold, but yet we went to Dnipro and we talked to the people and we showed that we care, right? And then we had them all on the table. So the short answer to your question is normalizing the discourse. It doesn't happen on a fortnight. We have the research behind us. I remember, David, you were there, and that's part of the normalizing the discourse where Nora Volkov, the head of the NIDA, was in a public presentation where she was actually sharing, like, I changed my thinking about the use of, this was ibogaine, or I don't know what it was. And yes, she was the head of NIDA representing a body of knowledge. And then she said, I changed my mind over the last couple of years. I think we need to be proud of ourselves if somebody with that authority is making that claim. I think it's recorded and it's now publicly available, but also downstream, it matters so much for grants being approved and for research. So the challenge here now is also normalize the discourse in Ukraine. And see how we can do that. And to your point, the absurdity that some people have in their amendments or their arguments, like, come on, like, let's grow up and let's have a mature discussion in this time, right? That we're not going to look back at time like, oh, we missed the opportunity. So that's the first answer. I think it's maybe a long-winded answer, and maybe shorter on the second one is where you said something about how we do treat soldiers, right?
Yeah, and some things why you chose this topic for the front line. What was the choice?
Yeah,
It was like,
well, frontline. So frontline is a long acronym where it starts with facilitating research, et cetera, et cetera. Frontline is now the buzzword. We feel we needed in Europe to do something with MDMA-assisted therapy, and Horizon has this great call for new medicines. And so we felt we combine a couple of things. So we needed to put MDMA on the map in Europe. And there are so many initiatives, but MDMA and then of course, Frontline is also calling out for Ukraine, and Ukraine needed to be part of this because they need to be recognized. One thing about that, and then I'll pause here, is as I said earlier, it's very hard for me as a clinical psychiatrist to do a randomized controlled trial with MDMA because I felt that we've already have so much evidence. And I think the EMA is also moving a domain where we need to have that sort of real world evidence, to your point, and the regulatory sandbox model is probably a way to actually use those data, even though they're not completely blinded and stuff. And I think that's a case that we need to make. To do the research, but at the same time hold responsibility for safety, et cetera, but not telling people like, well, I do not know what you're going to get. You may get a placebo or you may get MDMA. Now, in Ukraine, we could never do that. I don't think that any soldiers would be getting, well, I don't know, I may get a placebo. You will not have participation in that. So we need to be on, and I heard you say that as well, to your point, we need to move beyond, and we need to be rigorous in our research protocols, but we need to be able to, and it costs a lot of money to do the randomized trials, 30 million or more. So, and Frontline is 10 million, and we're yielding 260 patients if we can do it in Europe. And also in Donetsk and in 3 sites in Kiev. Poliana Lisova is part of that. I'm very happy that they're also engaged, and Bogolomets Medical University and Savchenko University. So yeah, that would be great if we can help Ukraine in that way by moving the field forward.
yeah, okay. Thank you, Eric. And regarding the normalizing discourse, we will do our homework. That's important for us. We understand that. And regarding this frontline, could be a kind of a trigger that will help Ukraine to join such a respectable and well-established program as Horizon is. So thank you for putting Ukraine into this.
Yeah, thank you. And lastly, I think Lady Zelenska should be, and maybe I'm not speaking for her, but I think the one who can sign this bill should be proud, right? Wow, we've done something major for Ukraine. If we can help her by moving across that line, like I'm not doing something that has risks. No, I think she should be ultimately, when that day will happen, that should she proud of making that major change. And then Europe is looking at Ukraine with a great hand to say like applaud.
Thank you.
Can I just make one other comment? As far as I know, there weren't any randomized placebo-controlled trials of renal transplants. I think we accept they work. I mean, I think that is. They have transformed medicine, but so the RCT isn't the only way of studying and health outcomes.
And probably, you know, all people who are like in the field always remember this picture with the boring guys saying, oh, today we're probably in a placebo group. You know, this in internet, that's meme, that's exactly. So my next question to the Professor Dom, and we would be really happy to know more about the approaches that European Psychiatric Association takes to the psychedelic treatment. And just wonder that in Ukraine, for example, when we speak inside the psychiatric community, sometimes we experience a kind of stigma and some kind of maybe a slight resistance to these new topics in the traditional psychiatric community. Did you ever have that problem, or how, and if yes, how it was overcome, and what are your approaches? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are many questions in one question, so thank you for that. On the first topic, I think an organization like EPA has kind of several missions or duties. I think one of the important is like collecting and showing and enhancing and supporting what has been done in psychiatry research. That's why our congresses are for. And I think on the side of psychedelics, I think this has been a large topic of our congresses. So we have really, I think, opened up, of course, based upon the good science quality, but present and give opportunities to present on psychedelics. So that is one thing I think we are doing and trying to support. A second duty that an association has is to look into education and guidance. And also there, as I refer to our guidance paper, we try to do our little step, and I'll put some positive steps in that way. And we have to be humble. I mean, there are no all enclosing guidance principles of so it's still looking, but we do an effort. I think a very other important duty for EPA is bringing together and creating a platform where national psychiatric associations can meet, where they can explain what is happening in their countries, where are the pitfalls or the challenges and what. And there I would be very happy, and by this also inviting the Ukrainian Psychiatric Association also on this topic, to exchange with their colleagues in Europe, because I know from other associations there's a lot of interest. And we have this platform that can be used for that, and which can be quite fruitful in the exchange. So it would be great that at one moment, Ukrainian Psychiatric Association could explain and tell the example of Ukraine, because I think indeed on the treatment of post-traumatic stress, you might be really literally on the front line of this and might help other European countries to look at different ways, both in what you're doing in practice and also how you change your regulation system to enable this and this, because we have to learn. We have all to learn how to do, as David suggests, to do other ways of regulation or do studies, etc., that are quicker, cheaper, and for the benefit for the public health. And of course, the fourth duty is doing policy and around topics we think that are important together with our partners. And we have a large network. And I think it's super important that we keep this network. And don't forget, we talk about psychedelics here, of course. But I'm very happy David raised the renal approach. And I think it's good in the sense, don't forget, we have a lot of medical other issues that can touch upon. So we need to be in dialogue with also other medical and psychological associations to put this together. As for resistance to something new, of course, we are all afraid a little bit of new things. But if I pulse a little bit what is happening in European psychiatry, I must say, I find more curiosity and interest in different countries and national psychiatric associations than resistance. I also see a lot of worries. Worries like we are really worried patients will go on the ground, like Eric explained, and look all sorts of resorts and treatment that are not so well regulated, etc. There are a lot of worries about the practical implementation and the affordability. So the equity, if things are developed, I think so. I think these are very important points. There are a lot of worries about how the ethical side of things. But on the main, I think there's a lot of good constructive curiosity. So I have much more colleagues who come to me and say, you know, in which countries this is already possible, than colleagues that come to me and say, we should watch out. So this is also one of the reasons why we really are very open to it. So I'm not so afraid about these barriers and these resistance. I think what we need to do all jointly together is create real world examples of how things can be done in a safe, affordable, equitable way for patients. And I think that will be the most helpful to demonstrate to them. And all of us psychiatrists know, and psychologists, we need new kinds of treatments, and we are living so we really need to be open to that. I hope this answered a little bit your question.
Yes, thank you for the answer and for sharing with us. And we really hope that this collaboration between Ukrainian psychiatrists and your association will be increasing. And like I'm optimistic, and I hope this resistance will be turned to curiosity, like for our Ukrainian colleagues as well. And moreover, I'm pretty sure that our colleagues could share a lot of imported and even curious things with Europeans, because our specialists have their own experience in the conditions that we have, unfortunately. But again, this is something that can bring us a common base and start to think about psychedelics like further, and to make this innovative approaches to mental health like more realistic to be put to the practice. So thank you. And now would come to our Ukrainian colleagues. And my question is to the Mr. Adamanov. The question is, just let us imagine the perfect situation, then a rescheduling just took place. And you have some funding from European colleagues or wherever, but the funding is solved. What could be the role of your institutions, and what could be the next steps, very practical ones, a kind of a roadmap to ensure that professional scientific research of the psychedelics is available in Ukraine?
I'll start with a joke. I think if mental health issue will be placed on the, just emergency level, you will have it on the next day, because when I was joking with my friends from emergency, they always say, you have to implement psychedelics in emergency, because we always just try everything we can. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. But if you leave jokes, funding is just a tool. I'll try to explain. In our country, for the last, 10 years, we lost science in hospital. In EU or in UK or in US, if you go to the best hospital in the city, it is usually university hospital or university clinic. And for the last 10 years, we lost this. So only starting from the last year, we reloaded this, and now we have very good pilot project in Lviv. Next one will be in Vinnytsia maybe. So we are having this very high concentrated science and practice in one place energy, and it helps. So my answer is we need sponsors for these clinical trials. It's not only about funding, it's just companies who are interested, just manufacturers or international associations of doctors. They can come. And I think we need dynamics and speed. We have to change this bylaw this summer. After that, sponsors should come and they should be interested to register clinical trials. Of course, I will be proud to be the first guy who signed these clinical trials, the first one with psychedelics in our country, and we will be happy to do it. And after, I think that we have to focus on a very specific hospital, 1 or 2 or 3 maximum, in order to show the best scenario. It should be like a showcase, because if you implement it simultaneously in each region, idea will die, because somebody will make a mistake. It's always like that. So I think so we should try with some pilot projects in the best hospitals we have, with the best doctors, with the best professors, with our friends, with partners. We can make this showcase, and then we can sell it to politicians, to another partners, to another countries. I mean, sell it, just show it, not money, and then it will work. That's my opinion.
Thank you for your answer. And it's really like optimistic to know that we have a kind of roadmap and we understand what preconditions have to be like done. And then, yes, you're absolutely right about the pilot projects. And we really hope that this, with the help of our European friends, maybe this front line can really trigger the situation and can allow us to move further. And my last question to Dmitry, you're with us for many years. So you're like one of our friends and supporters in Ukraine. And we all understand what benefits are for Ukraine in case of implementation of the psychedelic assisted therapy. But you work in legislation and you work with a lot of different issues, not with the psychedelics only. You have a helicopter view of like a lot of problems that happen in Ukraine, in Europe, and basically in the world right now. And what is your opinion? What do you think? What benefits could be for European partners and for overall security in this continent from Ukrainian experience? What can we propose to our partners? What's something special that they do not have in their countries, and we could be a source of experience?
I think there are 2 words. There are answers that answers your question. It's knowledge and safety. Knowledge, because knowledge is universal. What we know in Ukraine, everybody knows. If we are talking about scientific knowledge, and that's absolutely universal thing that we can give to Europe, to the whole world, and we are the only one who can give it now, because really the main problem with scientific research, with clinical trials, it's groups, it's participants. We don't have this problem. We have 500,000 people who are qualified for these clinical trials. We have, like in Lisova Polyana clinical stage, they said that at first with ketamine they had problems because it's stigmatized, because this ketamine protocol. But the next month, the next week, after people started to say, "Oh, it's not really dangerous," and it helped me, they didn't have this problem with participants anymore. There were queues with participants, and that was not a problem anymore. So what we can give to the first is knowledge, the first is patients, participants of clinical trials. The second is safety, because the borders with Europe are free, open between Ukraine and Europe. And if we have PTSD here, if we have traumatized, in Ukraine, we have traumatized veterans in Ukraine. That means the European Union have these veterans. If we have some examples of aggression already in Ukraine, that means European Union have it. So knowledge and safety, what we can give really to public health in European Union, in Ukraine, and now the biggest challenge after Second World War, we have more than 1 million veterans, like 25% to 30% have PTSD. Also, like 20-25% depression. Of course, they overlap, but we're talking about like 400,000 people to 600,000 people, only veterans without civilians. Nobody had it like this after the Vietnam War. So, or we have transgenerational trauma and we have this next 40 years to 50 years, or we go another way and adopt the first clinical trials with psychedelics, next step, medical usage of psychedelics, and we really treat hundreds of thousands of people with psychedelics. It can sound like arrogant, but we need it. We need to treat hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. And I also would like to add that, unfortunately, there is I don't even know how to call it, unique opportunity exists right now in Europe and in Ukraine in particular, when those transgenerational longitude studies can be designed, because we are pretty sure that we will experience some kind of problems, not only in these veterans in this generation, but for several generations like later. And there is no any place in Europe, and this is for good. And we hope it will never be in another place of Europe, the situation like that. But in order to improve our knowledge and research, including the psychedelics, we have to take this advantage to study this problem. Because maybe in some way, this knowledge will help us later to do something to prevent further wars. Because it's really important. It's really important not just to treat people, but also to prevent this bad situation in the future. And we're happy to have back our wonderful host who gave us this such an emotional speech at the beginning. Mr. Andriukaitis, we have you back. And
Let him get his breath back. I think.
Yes. And my question was that before he takes his breath back, if you have any questions to each other, please feel free to ask, because I'm leaving my moderator duties here and just have a free discussion.
I'd like to ask Stanislav, do you want to reflect any more on what you've heard today? Please.
So I'll say it in Ukrainian. Sorry, lads. I'll be happy to say it in English, but so. У 2014 році, коли почалась війна, наші воїни, герої, чоловіки, жінки, навіть діти 14 років, вони пішли воювати. У мене є друзі, які були зростом 1,60 м. Вони пішли воювати, вони пішли захищати цю країну. У 2022 році також. Я коли прийшов в пункт набору добровольців, я бачив навіть дітей, які пішли воювати за свою країну. Вони жертвували своїм здоров'ям, життям, самим ціннішим. І я розумію, що світ належить рішучим, мужнім. Ті, хто готові взяти справу в свої руки. І я б дуже сильно хотів, щоб наша держава, наша влада взяла в свої руки це питання ментального здоров'я, так як ми захистили ваше життя, життя людей, які в тилу. Ми дуже просимо ставитися до проблем ментального здоров'я, повернення нас після війни у цивільне життя всерйоз, бо це наше право. Як ви можете жити, розуміючи, що кожного дня ветеран покінчив життя самогубством? Як ви можете жити з тим, що знаючи, що люди страждають від психічних розладів, що вони мають панічні атаки, розуміючи, що є альтернативні методи лікування, які можуть принести, які можуть зцілити. Я на власному досвіді це побачив, і є сотні людей, яких я можу привести, які пройшли психоделічну асистовану терапію, і вони скажуть, що це нам допомогло, це нас зцілило. Це і ветерани, і матері, і загиблих хлопців. Є докази. Будь ласка, будьте рішучими, візьміть цю справу в свої руки, і я дуже сподіваюся, вірю в вас, що у вас знайдеться та ж сміливість, яка знайшлась у Збройних силах України. Дякую.
If I may, sorry, I always feel uncomfortable because in this house, you always can jump from one committee to another, from one obligation to another. For you, it's maybe a little bit strange. For us, it's very complicated. Yeah, I am also feeling, my feeling is very, I am a little bit nervous and disappointed. But when I opened this meeting with a question, I know from my surgical years, not do we dare, but do we have the evidence, the ethics, and the structure to do it safely? After everything we had heard today, and you follow this discussion, I believe we are closer to answering that question, and closer to answering it well. Stanislav's personal story shared with us at the start set the right tone for everything that followed. We are not discussing abstractions. No. We are discussing a personal ability to cope and to continue living. That is the question. To be present with their families, with their life, and return to normal life. I also want to reflect on something that said beneath today's entire discussion, the question of dignity. War strips people of control, of safety, of continuity. Effective mental health treatment is not a luxury or an add-on to recovery. It is part of restoring what was taken. A veteran who cannot function is not a recovered veteran. Is still affected. You need to understand it. A society that cannot support its wounded is not a recovered society also. Europe made commitment to Ukraine that go beyond weapons and badges. And one of those commitments stated or implied is that Ukraine's future belongs into our family, to European family, with European standards of care, solidarity, ambition for its people well-being. Today's meeting is a small but concrete step into such direction. So what comes next? As Mr. Gurin recommended, after this meeting, we will have an excellent communique with a clear signal to Ukrainian authorities of importance of paying attention to the problem and the solution available for people in need. The Soviet stigma. I belong to Soviet society. I spent a lot of years living in the same Soviet Union as the oldest generation in this room. And I know what does it mean, Soviet understanding of psychedelics and so on and so on. We need to go from Soviet mentality. We need to go out from Russian imperialistic ambitions. From my side, I will continue to raise these issues in the SANT committee and in the work with Mr. MEP's Action Group. The conversation we have had today needs to be developed further into health ministers, into regulatory agencies, into broader European policy debate on mental health innovations. And mental health strategies are ongoing, and we are raising questions about mental health from different angles. And of course, also drug policy strategy, harm reduction strategy. All those topics are interlinked, and we need to develop much stronger actions in this field. We started this morning with a question from surgery. Let me close with one from history. And you know very well, because we are both doctors. The treatment that once seemed radical, anesthesia. You remember? Anesthesia. Why it was difficult to introduce anesthesia. Then transplantation. Once again, how it was difficult. And then looking in therapy, antiretroviral therapy. Once again. But today they became standard because people refuse to let fear of the unfamiliar override the obligation to the patients. Thank you very much for these important discussions, and let us keep our fight forward. We need to join our forces and to go with slogan, act, align, accelerate.
Thank you, Vytenis. So you will see on the screens in front of you, this is the statement which will go out almost immediately as a result of this meeting. I would also just like to thank Tad and his team from PAREA for putting this together. A special thanks to the Ukrainians who are here and those who are online. And I'll just finish with one final reflection. I mean, obviously your war has been extraordinarily challenging and difficult and painful and costly. But you have come out of it, or you are currently the world leaders in drone technology. There is no doubt about that. And maybe we can aspire to a future in which you're also the world leaders in the healing of trauma. And maybe we can help you get to that situation as well. So thanks, everyone. And let's carry on fighting the fighters we heard. Thank you.